Welcome back to my ACOTAR 1 Part 2 recap. Today, we are talking about chapter 28, and this chapter is the definition of a false happy ending because Feyre finally gets sent home. Her family is safe, their fortune is restored, she is technically free, but the whole chapter feels wrong. This is not the triumphant homecoming Feyre thought she wanted at the beginning of the book. This is the chapter where she realizes that the human world does not feel like home anymore. And because we are in full spoiler mode, I want to talk about why this chapter matters beyond book 1, especially how it connects to Nesta, Elaine, Tamlin's later patterns, Feyre's trauma arc, and the bigger Maasverse theme of characters being freed. So let's get into chapter 28. I'm gonna call this chapter the chapter where Feyre goes home and realizes home is somewhere else. This chapter opens with Feyre packing to leave, and already everything feels uncomfortable. Alice dresses her in this fancy human outfit, silk, lace, gloves, the whole wealthy mortal look, but Feyre feels trapped in it. And I think this detail matters because it visually shows us that she's being forced back into a version of herself that no longer fits. She came to Prythian as a prisoner, but now going back to the human world feels like the cage. And then Alice tells her to make the most of her freedom, which is such a loaded line because technically Feyre is free. But emotionally, she is being sent away from the place she actually wants to stay. Then downstairs, Lucien sees her leaving, and Lucien is not okay with it. This moment is important because Lucien actually challenges Tamlin. He basically asks, "You are really sending her away now? You cannot even give her a few more days?" And that matters because Lucien sees the emotional damage this is causing. He has been sarcastic, sharp, and guarded for most of the book, but here we see that he does care about Feyre, and we also see that even Lucien thinks Tamlin is making the wrong call. Tamlin still refuses to debate it, and again, that pattern is right there. Tamlin is scared. Tamlin is trying to protect her, but Tamlin has already made a choice. Then we get the goodbye with Tamlin, and this is brutal. Feyre is trying to memorize his face. She gives him her paintings because she does not know how else to say what she feels. And then, as she's leaving, Tamlin finally says it clearly. He tells her he loves her. And Feyre knows she should say it back, but the words get stuck. And the reason is heartbreaking. She is thinking about the danger he is facing. She is thinking about the fact that he is immortal and she is human. She is thinking that she does not want to become another burden on him. So she says nothing. And that silence is devastating because this is not just a romantic missed moment. It is the curse almost breaking again. But once again, almost is not enough. As soon as the carriage enters the woods, magic takes over. Feyre is pulled into a deep sleep. And when she wakes up, she's no longer at the spring court. She is back in the human realm, and this transition feels important because it is not just travel. It feels like being forcibly moved from one life into another. She does not walk back home by choice. She is carried there. She is glamoured there. She is delivered there. And that makes the whole return feels even more wrong. Then Feyre arrives at her family new home, and everything is different. Her family is no longer starving. They have servants, they have money, they have a beautiful house, and everyone believes the fake story that Feyre was away caring for a wealthy aunt. So on the surface, it looks like Tamlin fixed everything. He took care of her family. He restored their fortune. He made sure they would be safe. But this is where the chapter gets interesting because Elaine reacts emotionally, but Nesta is very quiet, very watchful, very controlled. And for a reread, this is where I am already looking at Nesta sideways because the glamour seems to have worked. But Nesta doesn't feel fully fooled. She feels like she is studying Feyre, and that is a clue. Nesta's mind is not as easy to manipulate as everyone assumes. And then comes the real heartbreak of the chapter. The carriage leaves, and Feyre watches it goes back towards Tamlin, back towards the spring court, back towards what now she thinks as her true home. And she has to force herself not to run after it. That is the emotional reversal of the whole book so far. At the beginning, Feyre wanted nothing more but to get back to her family. Now her family is safe. Her promise to her mother is fulfilled. The mortal world should feel like freedom, right? But instead, Feyre feels this dark, growing certainty that she has made a terrible mistake. And then she remembers the Suriel's warning, stay with the High Lord. That is the line that should make everyone panic because Feyre did not stay. She left. And deep down, she knows something is wrong. So, chapter 28 is not really a homecoming chapter. It is a false, happy ending. Feyre gets everything she wanted at the beginning of the book. Her family is safe. Their fortune is restored. She is free from the treaty. But now that she has it, it feels empty because her heart is still in Prythian. And then carriage is taking her away from the spring court may have taken also away from the answer to the course. Now let's go full spoiler mode because chapter 28 connects to so much more than it seems. First, Nesta. The glamour is supposed to make Feyre's family believe this neat little story about where she has been. And for Elaine and their father, it mostly worked. But Nesta is different. Nesta is quiet. She is watching Feyre. She feels sharper than everyone else in that scene. And knowing what we know later, this is one of the earliest signs that Nesta's mind and will are not easy to bend. That matters so much later when Nesta goes into the cauldron, right? Takes from it and becomes one of the most powerful forces in the series. So even here, before Nesta had magic, before the cauldron, before a court of silver flames, the book is already telling us Nesta is not ordinary. Then there is Elaine. Elaine's reaction is softer and more emotional. But this chapter also sets up the strange way the Archeron sisters are all being pulled to Prythian in different ways. Feyre has already crossed the wall. Nesta is already resisting Fey magic. Elaine seems wrapped in the human world fantasy. Wealth, comfort, beauty, safety, but we know that does not last. All three sisters are being set up for transformation. And then there is Tamlin. Chapter 28 is important because Tamlin really did take care of Feyre's family. He restored their fortune. He made sure they would be safe. That is not nothing, but the way he does it is also very Tamlin. He protects through secrecy. He fixes things without fully explaining them. He makes choices for Feyre and then hopes those choices will be enough. And that connects directly what happens later in ACOMAF. Tamlin's love is real, but his version of love becomes control. He thinks safety is the same thing as freedom. And chapter 28 proves that those are not always the same thing. Feyre is safe in the human realm, but she is not free emotionally. She is not where she wants to be, and she knows it. That is why the Suriel's warning matters so much. Feyre remembers that she was told to stay with the High Lord, and now she has done the opposite. That line is basically the chapter screaming at us. This is the wrong move. And from the bigger ACOTAR perspective, this is the beginning of Feyre realizing that home is not the place she was born. At first, spring feels like home. Later, the night court becomes the home where she is actually seen, heard, and given agency. So chapter 28 is part of Feyre's larger journey of learning the difference between being protected, being possessed, and being truly free. And honestly, that theme runs through the whole Maasverse. In Thrones of Glass, we see power controlled through colors, blood, oaths, and empires. In Crescent City, we see power controlled through systems, halos, hierarchies, and the asteroid. And in ACOTAR, Feyre is technically free in this chapter, but the freedom feels false because the entire situation is built in glamour, secrets, and choices made for her. That is such a Sarah J. Maas pattern. That character is told they are safe, character is told they are free, but underneath it, there is always a bigger cage. So that is chapter 28. And for me, this chapter is not really about Feyre going home. It is about Feyre realizing that home has changed. She gets everything she once wanted. Her family is safe, their money is restored, her old promise to her mother is fulfilled. But instead of relief, she feels this growing darkness in her chest because deep down she knows she left something unfinished in Prythian. Tamlin said she loves her. Lucien tried to stop him from sending her away. The Sorial told her to stay with the High Lord. And now Feyre is in the human world, realizing that freedom is not really freedom when your heart is somewhere else. Chapter 28 is a false happy ending before everything collapses. And now we're getting closer to the moment where Feyre needs to decide whether she is going to stay or go back for the truth.